Imagine a 25-foot-tall wave moving at 35 miles per hour, destroying everything in its path. This isn't water. It's not a tsunami from the ocean. It is a sticky, boiling hot wave of molasses, brown, sugary syrup. This is the bizarre, tragic, and true story of the day Boston drowned in molasses. Welcome to American Annals. Our story begins in Boston's North End in the year 1919. This was a bustling, working-class neighborhood packed with Italian immigrants and local families. Towering over them all was the tank, a colossal steel cylinder 50 feet high and 90 feet wide. It was owned by the Purity Distilling Company, a subsidiary of U.S. Industrial Alcohol. What was in this monster? Over 2.3 million gallons of crude, unrefined molasses. But why so much? This wasn't for pancakes. This molasses was fermented into industrial alcohol, and that alcohol was a key ingredient in making smokeless gunpowder for World War I. The tank was a vital part of the war effort, a symbol of industrial might. But it had a dark secret. It was built in a rush. The company cut corners, ignoring all safety standards. The steel used was too thin, and the rivets were weak. From the day it was built, the tank leaked. It constantly leaked. Children from the neighborhood would bring cups and buckets to catch the sweet, sticky drippings. The company knew. Instead of fixing the leaks, they just painted the tank brown to hide the stains. Residents complained for years. They heard strange groaning and rumbling sounds from inside. The company ignored them all. The war was ending, but prohibition was coming. This meant industrial alcohol would soon be illegal to produce, so the company rushed one last massive shipment. On January 12, 1919, a new, warm shipment of molasses from Puerto Rico was pumped into the already strained tank. This new molasses was warm. The molasses already inside was near freezing. A dangerous chemical reaction began. Fermentation, pressure, gases started to build. 3 days later, January 15th, it was an unusually warm day for a Boston winter. Just after 12:40 p.m., workers at the facility were eating lunch. Suddenly, they felt the ground shake. Then they heard a sound like machine gun fire. It was the sound of millions of steel rivets popping, one by one, like deadly bullets. And then a deep, sickening, groaning, a roar. The entire 50-foot tank split apart. It simply unzipped. In an instant, 2.3 million gallons, 14,000 tons of molasses exploded outwards. A wave of pure, dark syrup, 25 feet high at its peak, blasted through the neighborhood. It moved at 35 miles per hour, faster than anyone could run. It hit the nearby firehouse. The entire building was crushed and swept away. It slammed into the elevated railway tracks, bending the steel girders like they were paper. A moving train was nearly thrown from the tracks as the structure twisted beneath it. Buildings were lifted off their foundations and pulverized. But this wasn't like a wave of water which passes. This was molasses. It was thick, viscous, a sticky, inescapable glue. People, horses, carts, they weren't just hit, they were engulfed, they were trapped. The wave was hot at first, but it quickly cooled in the winter air. It became a thick, cold, suffocating tar. Trying to move was like trying to swim in wet cement. Horses screamed as they were glued to the ground, unable to move, slowly suffocating. A 10-year-old boy named Pasquale Iontosca was walking home. He was picked up by the wave. He saw his little sister. She was swept under, and he never saw her again. Another boy, Anthony DiStafio, was picked up and carried by the wave. He landed on the roof of a building, looking down as his house was crushed with his mother inside. The molasses was 2 to 3 feet deep across the entire area. The first responders were cadets from the USS Nantucket, a training ship docked nearby. They waded into the sticky, waist-deep river of brown sludge. It was a scene from hell. The world was brown. The air was thick with a sickeningly sweet smell. Rescuers struggled to move. Every step was a battle. They couldn't get to the victims. They had to spread straw, blankets, anything, just to get a foothold. Firefighters tried to use hoses, but the cold molasses just gummed up the water. It took hours to free victims who were trapped, screaming, just feet away. Many rescuers themselves became trapped and had to be rescued. In the end, 21 people were killed. 150 were injured. Some victims were so coated in molasses they couldn't be identified for days. The cleanup was a nightmare. It took over 87,000 man-hours. Firefighters had to use salt water pumped from the harbor to dissolve the sugar. They used sand to try and absorb it, but nothing really worked. For months, the entire city of Boston was sticky. People tracked the molasses on their shoes, into their homes, onto the subway, into shops. Everywhere you went, you stuck to the floor. The sweet smell of death lingered for a decade. The company, US Industrial Alcohol, immediately tried to shift the blame. They claimed the tank was blown up by anarchists, by Italian immigrants. This was an outrageous lie. What would you have been thinking if you were a victim's family hearing this in court? Let me know down in the comments. The victim's family sued. It became one of the first and largest class action lawsuits in US history. The trial lasted for 3 years. It was a battle of experts. The company's lawyers argued it was an act of sabotage, a bomb. But the victims' lawyers brought in scientists, and they proved what really happened. They showed the steel was too brittle. They showed the tank wasn't tested. They proved the company was warned repeatedly that the tank was groaning and leaking. In 1925, the court finally ruled. The company was 100% at fault. It was a landmark victory for public safety and corporate responsibility. The company was forced to pay out settlements to all the victims' families. But what scientifically caused the collapse? In 2014, scientists at Harvard University finally solved the physics of the disaster. It was a perfect storm of failure. The tank was structurally weak, holding a weight it could never support. But the final nail in the coffin was temperature. The new warm molasses pumped in mixed with the old cold molasses. This created a massive, rapid temperature difference, stressing the already weak steel and the cold air outside. When the warm molasses burst out, the air instantly cooled it. This made it thicker and deadlier than anyone could have imagined. It was a physics lesson written in sugar and tragedy. Today, the site of the Great Molasses Flood is a public park. There's a baseball field where the 50-foot tank once stood. There is only a small, simple plaque, easy to miss, marking the disaster. But residents say, on a hot, humid summer day, they can still, sometimes, catch the faint, sweet smell of molasses rising from the streets. 21 lives were lost, not to a natural disaster, but to corporate greed and poor engineering. It's one of the strangest and most tragic accidents in American history. What is the most bizarre local history from your town? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to know how a single pig almost started a war between the US and Britain, subscribe to American Annals and watch our next video. This has been the story of the Great Boston Molasses Flood. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe.